Hey Spookies. So real quick check-in. By the time this video posts, it'll be the end of February. I'll have posted 7 other videos by now. Introduction, goal setting, getting past your failures, writing horror, talking to Chan. 3 Chan videos. Alright, that's kind of a cheat, but that's at least 5 videos, so worth doing a check-in. Back in my second video for goals, back in the beginning of January, good time for setting goals, I mentioned some of the things that I wanted to accomplish with this series and throughout this year. To be fair, that's January and February. I got 10 more months to go. So I wanted to connect with the public, make new fans, be available for my existing fans and for those new fans. I wanted to grow my following from where it was at the beginning of the year and deepen my connection with my following, which sounds like some kind of weird messiah, complex thing. It's not that, but I mean, as a public figure, as an artist or an author, platform is important nowadays, and it's something that I know I struggle with and I need to work on. So that's what I'm doing here. And researching social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, it's all algorithm related, and it's complicated these days. It's not as easy as put something out there and everybody will like it, That didn't work for me, honestly, in 2000. So in 2020, it's really difficult. It's a lot of work. So have I met my goals? Definitely not even close. The videos are a work in progress. I'm trying to move a little bit away from here's me, here's how I do things, here's my process, here's my goals. I'm trying to make it a little more about the viewer, about you. How can I help you? What is it that you want to see? What would you like to know about me? What tips do I have? How did I get to where I'm at? Like, okay, so my social media is lacking, but I've published 3 books. I've done a graphic novel series. I've worked on a movie, so I've done some things right. What could I share to you? What did I succeed at, and what could I help you succeed at? Hopefully I can offer something here and telling my story and how I did things. So I haven't really gained many followers. A few, and I'm very appreciative for everybody that does follow me on Instagram, at Stephen Emond Art, or on Twitter at Steve Emond, or here on YouTube with Machina Corpse. We started a second channel here where Chan and I play spooky video games, and that's a lot of fun. I'm hoping that helps in terms of building our following here. It's very hard to get people to care, or not even just to care enough to click on a link or to click follow, but just to see what you're tweeting to your own followers doesn't necessarily show up. So if I have 500 followers, I could tweet something and Twitter may only show it to 15 people, which is crazy and kind of annoying, but that's the algorithm now. Now, if I tweet something to 15 people and 10 of those people like it or comment on it or retweet it, then it expands. Twitter goes, okay, this is a quality tweet right here. I'm going to show it to more people. It's going to show it to maybe 100 of my followers. And if more people interact, it's going to show it to all my followers. So that's why it's so important when we say things like, comment, and subscribe. It's not just because that's our ego check and, hey, if they like, comment, subscribe, that means we're doing it right. It's literally so YouTube even shows anybody that our videos are out. If enough people engage and interact with it, we go up in the algorithms. I'm making shadows on my face here. This one's a dog. It really is super important, and we want to reach as many people as we can. We want to get those numbers up. We want to build our YouTube followings. We want to build up our Twitter followings, our Instagram followings, all that stuff. It's really important. That's our platform, and as a new company, you have to have a platform to sell your stuff off of. We're going to be doing comic books and graphic novels, and we're going to be printing things and bringing people in, and all that stuff doesn't mean anything if nobody sees what we're doing. So this is all a process. It's February. It's something we're working on. Let me know if there's anything I could do different. So evaluation, still new at this, not growing exponentially. We did reach 100 followers on YouTube here, so that means we finally have a nice URL. That's great. We're just going to keep putting stuff out. We're going to put out Let's Make Comics every Wednesday, Once Upon a Midnight Gaming every Monday, every Friday. So that's 3 days a week right there. We're going to be on social media more. I'm going to be starting a webcomic soon, and there's going to be a lot more about that in this series. So much more to come. It's only February. This is going to be a huge year. It's going to be really productive for me. The past few years, I haven't had anything really out there in the public, so this is going to be a big year. If you like any of my stuff, please subscribe, follow, because there's going to be a lot of stuff coming out, and I'm really excited about it. So, today, structure video. I've been promising it for weeks. That Exhumed conversation with Chandra was so big and so fun that it took up a good 3 weeks, but I've been promising this one forever. I'm going to lay out all of my tips and tricks for when I'm working on stories, how I kind of cement them into a solid pitch. A lot of this stuff comes from different books that I've read. It's really kind of fun. It's really fun doing these story structures. It's like being in English class and doing homework, except the homework's on your book, which is like makes it actually interesting and something that you want to do. Figuring out the who's, the hows, the whys, the wheres, all that stuff. Making sense of your story so that it makes sense to other people, that it tells a complete story, that it doesn't have loopholes everywhere, that things happen for a reason. It's all related to structure. It's probably the most important thing that people need to work on when they're creating their stories. This is all stuff, before you write word one, this is all outlining and planning and structuring. This is all the before work to make sure when you are writing, everything's going to come out smoothly and just the way you want it. So enjoy the video. Let me know what you think in the comments. I know I just gave you a whole spiel about it. Comment, like, subscribe. It means so much. You don't even know. And enjoy the video. Glad to be doing this again. So when it comes to story structure, I always try to think of things in chunks. It's easier to manage for me if it's just one piece at a time that you're thinking, even if the piece is the entire story. That's actually sometimes the easiest piece. And then you take each one of those chunks and you break it down just one at a time. So in writing, there tends to be outliners and instinctual writers. The people that want to map out everything, that's generally where I fit in. And there's the people that don't like to plan anything out and just figure it out as they go. They're experiencing the story as their character's experiencing the story. And even though I consider myself an outliner, there's definitely some merit to instinctual writing. We do have an instinct for it. Everyone is basically listening to stories their entire lives from a very young age. I mean, how many hours of television have you watched? How many songs have you listened to? Everything is really a story, and I think it's kind of built into us how a story should look and feel. So I do believe if you start off just writing something, you're going to end up with some kind of story. There is good reason to write without outlining. I think there's a lot of spontaneity and strangeness and vibe that you can capture a lot easier just letting your mind wander than you can trying to do everything scientifically. And I tend to do a little of both. I like to incorporate both. You do that instinctual work, and for me that means thinking about the images that come to mind when I'm thinking up a story, figuring out the themes, doing an exercise where I picture what the movie trailer could look like. A lot of that impulsive planning kind of writing I do instinctually. When I first think of an idea, how many weird things can I picture? What does that movie trailer look like? What kind of scenes do I want? What's just the tonal concept I'm going for? What emotions do I want to invoke? All that stuff is not really outlining. That's stuff that you can just kind of let your mind go and figure out. And when you kind of have that fresh story and ideas and characters, then you can use outlining to structure it into something that really works. My favorite metaphor is to think of writing as sculpting clay. Like, you can't sculpt anything until you slap some clay down on a table. And initially, that's nothing but a giant mound of clay. There's really nothing there, but that's basically your very first tool to work with. You know, the slab of clay is the genre you want to work in. It's the first image that comes to mind for your story idea. It's a loose concept or a character you really want to write. That's that first big meaty thing that you slap down and go, okay, this is something I'm going to work with now. For my book Happy Face, it was literally the title. I just wrote Happy Face. What could this be? That's my putting that slab of clay down on the table, something to work with. Then you start to shape it. That's the second step. That's adding in a twist or a hook. So if I say I want to write a superhero story, that's great. There's a million super stories. What's the twist? What's the hook? What's the actual thing that you're going to kind of sell there? I'm going to write a superhero story where the superhero is a homeless person. I mean, that's your first little twist. That's the first time you mold it into something. And high concept, you've probably heard the term high concept. So a high concept story oftentimes is just that. It's literally a genre, like a real broad concept, and they twist it in such a brilliant way that somebody says, wow, like without knowing anything else about it, I want to see that story. I will give you money to see that story. That's why it's high concept. It's so out there. Like, what a twist. So I mean, by the second step, you could be making money with plotting out your story. The first major shaping is coming up with a 3-act story. So you take your big broad idea, you come up with a little twist to it, a little hook, and then you figure out, okay, in 3 acts, what is this? What's the beginning? What's the middle? And what's the end? And with that, you have a story. With Bright Lights, Dark Nights, the beginning, let's say, well, first off, the big story is it's about modern interracial romance. The twist is it's also about modern racial politics that get in the way of the romance. 3 acts, boy meets girl. That's kind of how these things tend to go. It's usually a romance story would be boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back. If you want to be sexist, I guess, I don't know. It could be girl gets girl. So in Bright Lights, Dark Nights, it's boy meets girl, politics get in the way with this big racial profiling case that splits up the romance, and the boy has to kind of look within his own inner racism. He's got to kind of come to terms with some of his own concepts and get over them in order to resume this romance and get the girl back. So that's kind of the 3 acts of the story. The next thing I do is I do something with the middle, because if you look at a 3-act story, traditionally it's more like 4 acts, right? Except the middle 2 are both one big giant act. So an easy way to kind of flesh out the middle, which could be a very long part of your story, is to do some kind of big twist or inversion. Something big happened right in the middle of the story. And Happy Face, spoiler alert, skip a few seconds if you don't want to hear this. We find out why Happy Face is doing his big social experiment involving a death of a family member. In Wintertown, I changed the character's perspective. So instead of the whole book being from the perspective of Evan and trying to figure out what's going on with Lucy, all of a sudden halfway through we flip the entire thing. We go from Lucy's point of view. We quickly learn everything she's been up to and finish out the story from her point of view. So the 3-act structure not only works for talking about chunks of story, it doesn't just work for the full story, which is where you first use it, but it also works for every single chapter. So whether it's a chapter of a book or an issue of a comic book, almost everything you write can be its own 3 acts. A scene could be split into 3 acts, and it just helps solidify the story structure. It helps show that something's going to change, that there's a reason for the scene. So not only do I divide chapters into 3 acts, I make sure something changes every chapter. If it starts on a positive note, make it end on a negative note. Then you know something worthwhile happened in that chapter. If it starts on a negative note, make something positive happen. Kind of change the value, invert things. That way things are always moving, things are always happening, and it keeps it interesting. So I mean, that's some real basic story structure tips I wanted to give you. There are so many maps to use whenever you get lost. There's questions I ask myself, like, what am I writing about? Like, what am I really writing about? Not what's the story, what is this character doing, but what makes this story interesting to me? Like, what emotions do I want to talk about? Like, what makes this something that I feel qualified to write about? So, like, with Happy Face, it's about a kid doing a social experiment and making new friends and relationships. But what I wanted to write about is being a child of divorce, about moving to a new town and a new school, things from my own life, you know? So when you get lost and you're trying to figure out what should happen next, think about what is it that you're really writing about, what is it that you care about, and that can give you a guideline of where you want to be or where you need to get to. Thematically, thinking of the theme, what is this story about? Come back to that as often as you can in as many different ways as you can. You know, a theme doesn't have to be just one line somewhere in there. A theme can be something that shows up in all of the characters' relationships, his adversarial relationships, his romantic relationships, or hers. Also, if you get stuck, look at your scenes, look at your chapters, look at the moments you have, kind of lay them all out. What's missing? You know, how do you get from this chapter that you planned out to this next chapter that you know is going to be really good? What's missing in the middle there? And always try to cut what doesn't stack up to your best material and think, how can I make this as good as the best stuff in there? That's something I first learned working with an editor. I'd come up with a bunch of material. Some of it would be really good, and then some of it not so good, but you know, hey, that's how I get to the good stuff. You know, my editor would say, no, cut that. Make this part getting to the good stuff as good as the good stuff. It's tough sometimes, but it's useful, and it's really going to make everything stronger. And you can do it. You came up with the good stuff. You can come up with more good stuff. It's weird writing stories. It's like doing homework, but it's your own story. It's not somebody else's. So instead of sitting there trying to crack the themes and where everything fits in and why they chose this and why they chose that, you're actually doing the choosing. You're coming up with the themes. You're figuring out what's the best way to tell this story and why am I telling it that way. It's it's a puzzle that you have to figure out with your own words. So just always ask the right questions. What is the overall arc of my story? How does my character grow? What do they need to grow? And what scenes can I add to show and challenge that growth? It should be difficult, you know? It shouldn't be easy for your character to grow. Usually, growth is not something... Alright, some people voluntarily jump into growth. A lot of us, it gets forced on us, you know? Crappy things happen, but through it, you survive and you grow stronger. So the structure is important. It's something I learned when I was working on Happy Face and when I was working on the Emo Boy movie. At that point, all of the Emo Boy series I had written just instinctually, just because I had seen sitcoms, I had seen cartoons. I knew how a story should end. I knew how it should feel. And a lot of it's good stuff. A lot of it I'm really proud of. But when I was working on the movie and on the book, I kept running into structure problems because I didn't know how a full big story like that should work. You know, the structure is the spine. It's the skeleton of your story. And you can come up with all the cool scenes and dialogue and character tics that you want, but without the proper bones to hang them on, it's not going to stand up. It's just a pile of loose flesh and organs and fluids. It's a soup of human, and that is not a delicious soup. Structure soup is nutritious. All right, so I hope that helped. Story, it's like a living, breathing thing, and it's constantly changing, and just work at it, simplify, mess it up, simplify it again. Stick around. Next week I'm going to do a video on finding your style, whether that's your writing style or your art style. So that one's going to be fun too. Like, comment, subscribe, check out, just bumped into my video there. Check out Once Upon a Midnight Gaming. It's not as instructional, it has more swears, but it's a lot of fun, and it's video games. Who doesn't love video games? All right, that's it. Keep it real. Keep it spooky. Keep it spooky. And I'll see you next time.